This is incredible.
Such a great idea.
How did you come up with this?
It's practically genius.
I'm Lindsay McGuire.
And I'm Ryan Greaves. And this is Practically Genius, an original show from Formstack.
Sahil, it's so great to have you on the podcast today. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So first and foremost, I think it is safe to say that you are a no-code enthusiast. So please tell the audience why no-code.
Yeah, for sure. At this point, no-code enthusiast, no-code developer, no-code pro, like just different names floating around. But I'm a developer by training. I've been writing code for several years, 10 plus years. And I stumbled upon a low-code tool, which completely changed my perspective on this ecosystem. Before that, I was a skeptic. But when I actually used it and realized the potential that these tools possess, I definitely was convinced, and I was on board right after that.
And so you say the word skeptic. So can you dig into that a little bit? What were you skeptical about? What was keeping you at bay from trying them out? Just talk to me about that mindset real quick.
Yeah, for sure. As a person who writes code every day for a living, and as a developer who has been trained in this space, who has went to college for it, first thought that comes to mind is that, okay, this might be something for some side projects or some, hobby projects, or someone who's just trying to put something together, but it's not going to be something that something that could be scaled or something that could be customized enough so that it meets your requirements, and definitely not something that would, or in one line, I would say it's not something that could be customized to a point that a application written in code could do. So definitely I had those concerns. I actually had a mini experience with a no-code tool. At that time, I didn't even know it was a no-code tool many years ago, back when I used to work at Deloitte. But now that I reflect on it, I feel that that was definitely a no-code tool in that time. And the experience was really bad. And I think maybe that drove me away from even looking at any of these options.
Yeah, and so can you tell us a little bit about what was that aha moment when you finally did use a no-code tool that did impress you or kind of change your mindset about what it could be used for?
Yeah, so someone at my previous workplace introduced me to a tool, and he said prior to me joining, they had already purchased a license for it, and they said that, hey, for this upcoming integration, maybe you want to explore this tool. And it was a completely backend integration between two systems, data syncing back and forth kind of deal. And typically, you would set up the infrastructure for it, write the code, and you would go about your business in a very traditional way. And when he introduced me to this tool, I said, okay. I'm always looking to try new things, and I didn't really approach it from that. This is a no-code tool perspective. I just approached it as a new tool that's there. We already have a license for it, so let me see what I can do with it before making a final judgment on whether we're going to use it or not to do the work. And turns out, as I was just playing with it, I was able to do most of what we wanted to do in the integration just so quickly. And that just lit a bulb in my mind that, wow, if this is what this tool can offer, it just brought that sense of joy and kind of almost relief that this has endless opportunity and endless possibilities, because the way that tool was built and designed, it was designed keeping in mind that the users can have many number of use cases that the developer of that tool cannot even think of. So it provides that Lego blocks to then go do whatever you need to achieve. So it had that enough flexibility that I was looking for, that I usually look for, as developers, we want the full flexibility. We want to be able to do whatever we want. And you can do that with code. But when I could achieve all of the goals of that project in that tool, it just, had that light bulb moment that, okay, the game has changed.
I think a lot of people have that experience. When I go back and think about our Rise of the No-Code Economy report we launched last year, we actually found a lot of people didn't even understand what the concept of no-code was, but when we asked them about a list of no-code tools, they actually could name some and were using some. So it almost sounds like a lot of people are using no-code but don't know they're using no-code. So I want to do a little round of kind of quick definitions with you.
Sure.
So how would you define no-code?
Yeah, so and I talk about this. I do a workshop, and I talk about this in my workshop as well. Start with okay, let's start by defining what is no-code. And I think in my mind, it's a tool that lets you accomplish something that otherwise you would have to write code for to build something unique, and something that doesn't exist, something that's built from the ground up, and for which you would have traditionally written code for, but now you're able to do it in a more visual manner, is NoCode for me. Because I know that NoCode has also become a little bit of a marketing term. Like a lot of marketing landing pages are slapping just the term NoCode on it. But I have to kind of also keep that in mind that not everything is a NoCode tool, because and I joke about this, that, hey, for example, if we go with that definition, then even cooking and photography is no code because we don't write any code for it. But that's not the thing. The tool must allow you to build something new and unique that otherwise you would have had to write code for, but now you can do visually. So that's in my mind, I define no code.
Perfect. And then kind of the next step up from that, how would you describe a low code tool?
Yeah, so that's a very, and also one thing to keep in mind is that I tell people often that these things are not mutually exclusive. It's a no code to code spectrum. And just because you started on one end of the spectrum doesn't mean that you can go on to the other side. So it applies to non-technical people and technical people. You started on the code side like I did, you can go on the no-code side. You can leverage those tools. It's not, and I say the smartest engineers know to use the right tools for the job. And if no-code tool fits that bill, then why not use it? And same thing applies for non-technical people who start on no-code end of the spectrum. They can make their way up to the coding end of the spectrum. In fact, it's a great way to start because it lowers the barrier to entry. You get to know the basics. You get to build something. You get to see the output. That might even excite you to go towards the other end of the spectrum and start with something small, some scripting languages. And so when you start to feel comfortable with no code is a perfect time to get into a little bit of low code space. And to define it for you, it just means that you went out to achieve something with no code, but you hit a roadblock. The tool maybe doesn't allow for it, or it's not, that customization option is not there. And most of the no code tools then have this option that bring in a code snippet to accomplish what our tool cannot do. And that's where you start to get into the low code space, where primary objective of the project is achieved with the no code tool itself. But for that last 10% or maybe 5% that you couldn't do with the no code tool, bring in that code snippet, bring in that little script that maybe your developer friend wrote, or maybe you wrote yourself, and extend the functionality of the tool. Another
term that gets thrown around a lot, especially this past year when people are talking about no code and low code, is the citizen developer. So can you tell us about what you think citizen developer means?
Yeah, so I understand what the definition of a citizen developer is. So ideally, it's a person in an organization who does not have a technical background, is close to the business, is tech savvy, maybe that's not even a requirement, I guess, but is looking to build a solution to solve their own business needs. And typically they would have in the past gone out to the IT or the engineering team to get it done. But now with these tools available, they can develop it themselves. And so essentially these people, citizen developers, are people who are developing a software-based solution using the no-code tools without any technical background or expertise, and they're self-sufficient. So I think they're called citizen developers because there's anyone but the engineering team in the organization. People from those teams are able to build their own solutions, so they're being marked as citizen developers. Although I am also telling these people that you should, if you're developing software, you are a software developer. So hopefully we will walk away from sort of differentiating as the two sides merge. But for now, I think when people say citizen developers, the non-technical people in a company, or even individuals who are able to build software solutions using the no-code tools.
Talking about your experience with no code, so you have a program called 30 Days of No Code. And so what is some of the things that you teach in this program, and what are some of your favorite no code and low code platforms you use?
Yeah, so 30 Days of No Code actually is still in development. I have done several other workshops on no code. So the way 30 Days of No Code started was my own sort of public journey in the no code space. So when I was convinced and I wanted to go sort of deeper, I wanted to share everything that I'm learning with my audience on LinkedIn. And And I was definitely in for a surprise and a big sort of journey. Like I thought it would be a one-off thing, but as I was going deeper in it, I just continued to get impressed. And honestly, I could go on forever, like because there's so many tools that I haven't even touched. But a few of them that stand out from my journey in that at least 30 days was tools like the glue, like the Zapier, Integromat. Definitely the two tools that sort of continuing on our previous discussion or previous question, how they integrate all the existing other tools, whether these are SaaS tools or no-code tools or whatever they may be. Zapier and Integromat has made it really, I was reading a definition the other day. They make internet greater than the sum of its parts, right? So to speak, because individual tools can offer only so much, but when you start to connect them is when you start to see a big picture. And for people who don't have any development experience and they need this kind of interactivity between tools, they are definitely looking at Zapier and Integromat. I think it's called Make now. So that definitely forms a core for me.
There's just so many tools coming out every day. We're seeing new no-code tools doing new functions and features and processes. And one interesting thing we found is we have actually done some research about digital maturity, and we're coming out with a report called The State of Digital Maturity, Advancing Workflow Automation. And one thing we did with that is we surveyed 2,000 U.S. knowledge workers and then took the results from that survey. We asked about workflow automation and what's in your tech stack and how is your culture and an assortment of a variety of questions. And then from there, we kind of compared them to a digital maturity model and kind of mapped out how digitally mature are organizations right now. And what we found is that the most digitally mature organizations use no code. Actually, it's 84% of those optimized organizations empower their employees with no code tools. So in your mind, what do you think these organizations have discovered about no code that has made them go all in?
Probably the ease of use, how fast you can get something done, the empowerment that your citizen developers have. I know, like for example, in a HR team or a marketing team or a sales team, they use a lot of these tools that integrate with something like a Zapier and Make, and for them, it's really powerful when they can automate some of their stuff, because some of their workflows are very repetitive. And if you empower them to go, like, you have IT's blessing, go use Zapier all you want, integrate your systems, build automate your workflow. I think just the employee happiness score would definitely go up because you're able to automate and, focus on things that matter and not be, doing repetitive work. Definitely that's an area I see where no code is being used. I know Zapier at many places being used. I personally used a tool called Tray, and that's where my journey started. And it's an enterprise tool. I call it, Zapier on steroids. And so if Zapier can achieve that much, imagine what can Tray achieve. And then if you hand that over to someone who's a little bit technical, can figure it out quickly, the productivity skyrockets. And then that's what people want at the end of the day. That's what managers want. That's what, stakeholders want. So all in all, if it meets your criteria, if you can get what you want to do, has all the it checks all the boxes when it comes to security and regulations and whatnot, then it's a win-win.
How do you think no code affects an organization's overall output when they're able to get those 2 hours back every day for every employee? How do you think that impacts an organization?
I mean, I have to say that, they can only be positive impacts of that kind of added productivity, because so if you think about it for a second, so what have you achieved by automating a workflow? First of all, you're not going to miss anything. All the things in your workflow are going to go, and you're not going to miss completely just going through a workflow just because you miss a notification or miss a message or miss an email. If it's automated, it's going to be taken care of, whatever the triggers you have in place. So you have that, definitely you achieve that peace of mind. Then you are able to sort of step back and see what your workflow is, because when you're building it, you have to kind of think about, these are all the steps I go through. Are these steps even necessary? Can I do them in a different way? So you kind of get this big picture, and you're able to step back and really optimize, and then implement it that way. So you get that added benefit. And then, as I said, if you get that time back, I know definitely for myself, if I free up my time by automating something, the joy that brings, that just sort of that happiness index, quote unquote, kind of goes up, because now I have this additional time available to work on more challenging projects than the repetitive tasks. So, I mean, I have to say the impact is positive and efficient, both monetarily and time wise, and then you are empowering people who are otherwise not involved in technical projects. So yeah, all in all, it's pretty good.
I love that you bring up joy. I think we can all use a little bit more joy in our workday, especially when you think about the burnout that has really come to fruition in the last year and a half, 2 years. I think finding that joy in your workday is so important. But I also know that even if it's the right tool, if it can do amazing things, if it's not implemented well, you can fail. So do you have any tips or best practices that people can keep in mind as they're implementing new no-code tools?
When it comes to implementing, speaking on the development side, and I say this even for projects that are developed with code, right? Like, you have to have a way out. Like, you need to make sure that your data is decoupled from your front end, because front end frameworks will come and go. Today's this, tomorrow's that. But data usually stays in place. Like, the API is usually more long-term implementations that you reuse over several years. So if that is kept in mind, especially for mature organizations, if you're a startup, like, you can get away with these risks because speed is everything. But if you're a mature organization, you can afford a little more resources. You can take that time to plan that, okay, even if you're going down this path, do we have a way out? Do we have a way to kind of move on to something else if this doesn't work out? So definitely something to keep in mind. And for sort of automation-based projects, I think sort of one pitfall for that kind of project is, or using those kinds of tools, is with code, you always have version control. You always have, exactly how it evolved. You can go back in time. You have testing in place before your code is deployed. But with these tools, we're not there yet. I mean, you can have workarounds. You can still follow the best practices that you maybe have, like a draft flow, which you test internally. Only if it's working well, you kind of implement it for your real use case. So I think that's where partnership between IT engineering and other parts of the organization using these tools could be helpful, so that they can act as a guide. They can tell them that, hey, like, maybe the right way to do it is this way versus just going that way, or what are the best practices that we follow in our day-to-day. Because as software engineers, these are sort of ingrained in us. We know exactly how to do testing. We know how to ensure quality. Not that we always do it right, but at least we know what we are supposed to do. So those best practices could be leveraged, and collaboration and partnership there becomes even more important. So and I'm sure as these tools mature, I know I'm talking to a couple of tools who are looking at how to implement this kind of version control, collaboration, because let's say, like, I built an automation with my teammate comes and kind of changes that without my knowledge. We don't have any of that approval workflow that we usually have in code. So some of the things that still have to be kept in mind.
Yeah, you led really well into my next question, because I think a lot of the times when no code is brought up, it's seen as this magical, mystical, amazing, all-powerful tool. But every tool has a pitfall or has issues you need to be aware of. So what would you say are some of the pitfalls people could fall into with no-code tools?
So because it's no code, you don't have access to some of the sort of the tools and processes that you have with code, right? With code, you follow your sort of you use some kind of a versioning tool, you have some kind of an approval process, you have some kind of a deployment pipeline. So you're going through these checks and balances as you develop, and that way you can ensure when something hits production, it's working as expected, or it doesn't go to production. With no code, at least right now, at least in the tools that I've seen, you kind of don't have any of these tools available to you. You don't have sort of versioning, you don't have this approval process, you don't even probably have collaboration to the level that you can have in code, multiple people working on the same code base, and then you kind of later merge the changes together. So here it's like only one person is working on it at a time kind of deal. And then you, as software engineers, we know how to kind of recreate that kind of workflow. But if you're not from a technical background, you have not worked in a traditional code-based team where they go through these steps, you won't be aware, you won't know, and you will sort of do things as the tool is guiding you to do. And that could have some sort of negative consequences as, oh, I made a change I was supposed to, and it's now live. So how do you sort of, kind of think about those things, and especially if it's internal tool, maybe less risky, but if it's something that you're using as an external, something that your customers are using, then it becomes even more critical to have that kind of checks and balances, quality, version control, in some form or the other. So things like that. And then, as I said, it is kind of a SaaS in the sense that your data is going to be with someone else. So, and I know like some companies might not be comfortable with that feeling because, based on the business you're in, whether it's fintech or healthcare or something that's like highly regulated, what does that mean for your customer data? Like, does the tool offer all the guarantees? Like, are they compliant? So those kind of checks have to be done ahead of time, because if you are on your own cloud or own sort of data center, like you own everything, you have full control. But if it's with someone else, what does that look like? So yeah, some of the things that still are kind of evolving. And I guess the other one is not having any visibility into the infrastructure is great because you don't have to worry about it, but it's also not great because if something goes down, what is your sort of SLA agreement with the tool, right? Like if it's something developed in-house, you are paging your engineers, you're getting on call, you're kind of debugging it, figuring it out. So you have control. But if you're built on top of a tool, then you're kind of relying on their engineers to figure out, and you don't know how long that's going to take. So do you have like an SLA agreement? Are you going to drop the ball for a customer? So things like that have to be still kept in mind.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I had necessarily thought of how many benefits of no-code tools can also be kind of a double-edged sword.
Definitely.
Making those real-time edits sometimes can definitely bite you in the butt. And especially, too, like you said, if something goes wrong and you don't have full power of that, what do you do? So those are really great points. One other thing you brought up, too, earlier was talking about partnerships and being able to partner with other departments, other teams, other workers. So who do you think needs to be involved in either the purchase, the exploration, or the implementation of no-code tools? If there's a team or an organization that's thinking, maybe I should start looking into this, who are the right people to bring into the room for those conversations?
Yeah, I would say definitely someone from IT, and then your security team if it's a separate part of the organization. So yeah, definitely IT, definitely security, if especially around tools that are going to be receiving some kind of a customer data or sensitive data. So you want to sort of get their buy-in. And then if you're evaluating between if you know on what you need and have checked that the tool offers that, then between IT and security should be covered. But if you are looking for a tool and you're not sure if it's going to be able to do what you need to do, someone has to maybe try it out, or someone has to kind of make the judgment that how customizable it is, or are we going to be able to achieve the end result that we want. Might not hurt to involve someone from the dev team or the design team even, to kind of get their take on what do you think of this tool? Do you think it's going to, because this is what we're looking for, what's your take? So it can hurt to get their guidance and maybe have them identify what could be the blockers down the road, whether it's going to be the performance of the app built with the tool, or whether it's going to be how flexible it is with design. Like, can I achieve exactly the layout that I'm looking for? If you're not able to answer those questions yourself, especially around performance and stability and whatnot, it could you could benefit from involving someone from the dev team for sure.
So what are some things you should think about when choosing to use either a no-code tool or a more traditional developer tool, or using them together even?
Again, I mean, it'll depend. I'm almost forming sort of like a matrix here in my head that what's the maturity of your organization, and then what kind of a project we're talking about. Is it an internal tool? Is it a customer-facing tool? And then based on where you land in that matrix, you will have some combination of either no-code or low-code or no-code plus code. So it depends on a lot of factors. But if I were to sort of summarize it, I would say if you're a mature organization and you already have resources at your disposal and you know like this is an external facing project where you can't compromise quality, can't compromise performance, you probably might as well leverage your existing resources, because at this point you already have a tool set and skills in the team that you could probably get a project done pretty quickly because you're not starting from scratch. So might as well, stay custom. But if you go to the other end of the spectrum where you are like just starting, you don't even have revenue yet, you want to get something done quickly, maybe it's in your best interest to start with no code, so you spend minimum amount of time to get something in front of the customers and start getting that feedback loop, right? And even if you're an engineer, you are a technical founder, you could still leverage no-code tools because it helps you move even faster, and you have all the skills already to design it in a way so that if your product is working and you know that you need to scale it, you've already designed it in a way that you don't have a hard time moving towards a custom solution if that need be. So those are sort of the two ends of the spectrum. Like if you're just starting out, maybe best to start with no code. If you're like a really mature organization, already have in-house capabilities and resources, maybe stay custom. But then on the mature side of the organization, if you're working on an internal tool where the user base is limited, just your internal employees, you need something quick, you need a dashboard set up, doesn't necessarily make sense to involve the dev team to build something because it's probably going to be throwaway work. That's a great time for mature organizations to start dabbling in no code and low code, because these, as we discussed towards the beginning of the conversation, these things tend to not get prioritized as often, but they can be a huge help. So for mature organizations, definitely internal tools is a great place to start. To dabble into no code. That way you start to experiment with some tools, you can take some risks, you can see if they benefit from, if you benefit from it, and sort of double down on it. And then maybe a next step could be, if you are, as a mature organization, looking to build a prototype of a new idea, maybe try a tool that's already, you have a license for, give it to someone to play with, build it kind of something quick, and see if you can put that in front of the customers instead of putting a prototype which is not interactive. So there's, for everyone, there's a use case for no code at this point, given the options that are now available. And there's a whole sort of list of no code tools that are just for enterprise. Like they don't even entertain non-enterprise type people because they're like high cost, and sort of they come with all the assurances that you might need as a big enterprise. So there's an option for everyone, and it's a good time to start using them because it's pretty clear that that's where we are headed, and you can have the leverage that these tools bring now versus waiting a few more years because they're only going to get better.
I think that might surprise some of our listeners of thinking about there are actually no-code tools out there that strictly supply enterprise orgs. I think that will really surprise some listeners. And another thing I think might surprise some listeners, especially maybe the more technical, IT-driven, ops-driven, is the idea that does no code have a place in the dev team, the engineering team? So can you talk a little bit more about why a dev team would use no code tools? Are there efficiencies they can gain by having those in their tech stack as well?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, especially when you're at the prototype level, right? You're trying to develop a new idea. You don't know yet if it's going to work or not. And in those times, I know the speed to market is everything, because there's some kind of development that led you to this idea. Your product person came to you that, hey, we want to test this thing. And the last thing they want to hear is that it's going to take 3 months or 4 months to even develop the prototype. So what they do in that case is then they turn to the designers to build them a mock-up, which people can click around on some predefined spots on this mock-up to kind of get a sense for if users like the approach. that could be replaced with an actual working prototype built with no-code tools. So dev teams can definitely use that. And in my personal experience, is what I'm seeing is that software engineers who embrace no-code, low-code are going to have the maximum leverage in the future because they have the technical capability, and now all of a sudden they're powered with speed. So the amount of ideas they can just build so quickly and test is a superpower, because coding already is considered a superpower, is the most sought after skill. And then if you already know that and you can do it even faster, the possibilities are endless. So for a dev team, like if you're in a prototype phase or you're building a product that you're not sure yet is going to work, and if it's not worth spending months on development, all that high cost, then leveraging a no-code, low-code tool is probably in your best interest.
Yeah, power and speed, definitely, for sure. And I also think it's interesting to bring in the fact we produced a guide a few years back called The Digital Transformation Divide. And one of the facts that we pulled up in that is that if you look at the global workforce, it's some crazy 1% of the global workforce really knows how to code. It's crazy. And so, it does make a lot of sense to start thinking about there are not enough resources to go around for everyone. So how can you use these tools to fill in those gaps?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You bring up a good point. I read that stat actually somewhere as well, and that kind of blew my mind because the way things are headed, I can say almost already, every company is in some shape or form a tech company. And whether they outsource their tech work or do it in-house, you need people who can develop software. And that's only going to increase. And it's pretty clear that the number of engineers that are trained every year are not enough to meet that demand. So how do you fill that gap? It's a no-brainer that making software development accessible to more and more people via these no-code, low-code tools is the way to go, no doubt, and to fill that skill gap. Also, if someone is willing to, as I say, break into tech, they want to break into tech, the barrier to entry with learning to code and build something meaningful with it and gain the experience that you need to gain a developer job is really high. You really have to be committed. If you're already working full-time, then it's really hard to kind of come out of that your existing skill set. Some people are able to do it because they're young. Maybe they just quit their job and just go to a boot camp and do it, and then they can get trained that way. But for others who don't have that option, they should really look at no-code, low-code because the barrier to entry is low. You can slowly ease into kind of software development with this kind of tool because there are people who are looking for no-code developers. There are jobs listed online now that are specifically looking for no-code developers. And sometimes they even have the name of the tool mentioned. So you could ease into that, ease into a development career by learning these tools. And then, as I said, slowly work your way towards the other end of the spectrum, because then you'll be surrounded by developers, you'll be surrounded by that kind of thing, you build the muscle. So it's great for people who want to get into this. Maybe they missed the boat earlier in their career, but now they can do that. And it's great for organizations because having access to developers is not cheap, and even if you're willing to pay, there's not that many to go around. So and that way we solve more problems quickly.
The job portion of it you bring up was one of the most fascinating pieces for me when I was working on the Rise of the No-Code Economy report, because we literally developed a whole section of that report based around the fact that there is a job market literally coming out of no-code. It is wild, really exciting. Well, Sahil, for organizations who are not using no-code tools yet but want to begin, what is one initiative with no-code that they should try to tackle?
Definitely automation could be a good place to start. As I said, a lot of, if you are already using cloud-based SaaS products, you already have licenses for them. It's pretty common that they don't talk to each other, they don't integrate well just by themselves. So you could bring in an automation tool. I mentioned Zapier is a great place to start, or even if you want to get something serious, you can get Tray. So that could quickly help you realize that you can achieve some of these integrations really fast, and you can make the most out of these tools. or maybe just the workflow could be optimized using these tools. So definitely that could be a great place to start the automation space. And then if you want to go a step further, if you already have automation in your sort of tool set, then you can build on top of that and build some kind of internal tools that otherwise you would have gone out to get a SaaS product for or SaaS license for. Maybe instead of getting the SaaS product, get a NoCode tool, which is enterprise grade and allows you to build a tool internally to solve a specific problem, and maybe train a couple of citizen developers to do it. Because what's going to happen is, in a typical software development, the business person will write down the requirements and the development team will develop it. But in this case, the person who was about to write the requirements can just develop it themselves. So they exactly get what they want. So yeah, start with automation, maybe ease into internal tools or sort of productivity, employee help type tools, and then kind of go from there.